Hey guys, it's me, CriticaLink. Yes, you already know that. You're subscribed to the channel, and we're doing another art video. I'm gonna try and do full commentary this time, because I slacked last time. And once again, we're continuing the Pokemon Trifusion thing. This week it's Ivysaur and Tyrantrum. Two of, I wouldn't say they're among my top 3 favorites, but if I had to pick a favorite from each gen, they'd definitely be in there. I know Ivysaur is definitely my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon. It's even my favorite Smash Bros. Pokemon, which is why I'm really, really happy that he's coming back in Smash Bros. Ultimate. But that's beside the point. I actually had a lot more trouble with this design than I did with the Probopass and Ivysaur, which is strange considering the previous one was combining body types that weren't even remotely similar, while these ones were biped and quadruped. And I mentioned before that that's typically easier, but in this case I actually found it more difficult because they're both reptilian. And because of that, I was trying to avoid compromising the design to a point where it would look too much like both of them at the same time. I wanted to give it a unique flair while keeping the thematics of the original design in it. And it actually took a while. I actually had to edit out quite a few of my first few drafts because it took me like an hour to figure out what I wanted for the final design. As you can see right here, I'm still working on the mane. For Tyrantrum, he has a crown on his head, and I like that idea a bit, but I wanted to combine it with both the mane on its back and the flower and leaf concept of Ivysaur and whatnot. So I worked on building a brow / crest on the head, structured from flower petals, which in my headcanon would be rock hard. It's because it's a Pokemon. I mean, I guess it could be soft petals, just intimidating the opponent by making them look big, but you know, that's how it is. And for the leaves of Ivysaur's design, I decided to integrate that as like grass hanging out of its mouth, as you can see right here. I thought that was a neat touch. I did mess up the size right there, as you can see me correcting. And, yeah. I'm pretty happy with how this design went. The hard part was implementing the arms and legs, because it took me a while to figure out how I wanted to implement the forearms. So I was thinking instead of having a pure quadrupedal design or a pure bipedal design, I was aiming for a sort of middle ground. Like bears. You know bears. They're capable of both standing on their hind legs upright and move around primarily by pedaling. So I was going for a sort of design like that. During the drawing process for this, I did reference pictures of bears on Google, so I knew how to get the body type the way I wanted. But that was mostly during the first few drafts, so by this point I had a bit more of an idea of what I wanted out of the drawing. I went with double claws on the forearms, because that's carryover from Tyrantrum, since Ivysaur doesn't really have much there. And I figured that since the arms were bigger, it would make up for the difference, even though it was basically just transferring a similar design concept from the Tyrantrum hands to Ivysaur hands. Yeah. And to sell the bit where he's supposed to be able to both walk bipedally and quadrupedally, I have him sort of hunched over with one arm used just for support rather than actually just using all of his legs to support his entire body weight. That can show that he might be able to stand up on his hind legs if he needed to, but also he is restricted by he's restricted to quadrupedal movement for traversing the ground. Yeah, the hardest part of this drawing for me was working on the hind legs. I couldn't tell you why, because I didn't have nearly this much trouble back when I was doing the Pokemon redesign series. You know, the first thing where I did the Charmander, Charizard, Charmeleon, and all that. So why the hell this one took me so long is beyond me. I've actually had this drawing done for a couple of weeks now, and I'm only just now getting around to recording the audio for it. Because I've honestly been slacking off a little bit, because I had worked myself to exhaustion keeping up on a weekly schedule. You might have noticed that with that dip where I didn't do a video after the pre-E3 video. That was partly to do with that. And also some other stuff which I'll cover in an update video. But yeah. Right about now, I'm starting to get the leg design down, and I also had a bit of trouble with the tail. I was wanting to aim for a leaf design, but I didn't think that made much sense since it had petals running down the back. So I eventually went with a seed concept, trying to replicate. I don't remember what that type of dinosaur is called, but it's the one that has like the bludgeoning bone on the end of its tail. It's sort of like the Stegosaurus, I think, where it has like that impaling component on its tail where it just slings it and it would basically be a fatal blow to anything it hit. But it's more concussive. I can't remember the exact species I'm thinking of, but hopefully one of you guys knows what I'm talking about. I'm not that familiar with ancient life and whatnot. And there's me adjusting the legs again because I wasn't happy with their positioning. No, it's not great. It's not great. But we're getting there. On the timeline that I'm looking at, the final version should appear in the next few minutes. I did redraw, but remember, remember, you can delete stuff even if you've been working on it a while. If you're not happy with the design, start over. Just start over. You can tweak a design all you want, but you might not get the result you want unless you start from a clean slate. In this case, I was happy with the head and the arms, but it was the lower body that was absolutely killing me. And here's the part where there's another part of the design that I thought about. I wanted to integrate more of the plant aspect because I felt like the petals would be too much of a focus on the flair and scale and intimidation on the Pokemon or whatever. So I tried to integrate some vines hanging from its chest to help it look bigger to mask its thinner upper torso. I was mostly playing to intimidation, like how a lot of animals will like spread out feathers, or I guess in the case of Cobra, that skin flaps to make itself more threatening predators and other imposing things. That's basically the entire concept behind this. I still maintain that it's a herbivore, but the head's slightly more based on a snapping turtle than it is a T-Rex, obviously. Like, you don't see any teeth on it, so much as, like, the bone in the face is used to clamp down through whatever enters its mouth. It's well adapted for eating plants, even though it is a plant. Does that make it a cannibal? I don't think that's how it works. I guess a plant eating another plant would be about the same as a human eating a cow or something. I don't know how it is, especially when the plant Pokemon is based on a dinosaur. I guess in this case, this Pokemon would be a grass dragon type, which you don't really see too many of. I think the only grass dragon type in the series right now is the Mega Evolution of Sceptile. And while that is miserably awful typing, it is really cool that it exists, and I just wish somebody would do something with it. I really think that grass dragon typing would work really well with the skill, what's it called? The skill Snorlax has that reduces the damage from fire and ice attacks. I want to say it's Thick Fat. Thick Fat, so that's what it is. I think that would be a really good skill to have on a grass dragon type. I guess the dragon type would eliminate the weakness to fire, but the Thick Fat would at least reduce the quadruple damage from ice. And since ice attacks are pretty common on most major Pokemon that are used in competitive play, even though ice typing itself isn't used, I think that would strike a good enough balance that a Pokemon like this could conceivably be useful in competitive play. I would bank on it. Especially when it's a made-up design based on fusion. Hey, what can I say? I like competitive Pokemon, so... excuse those ramblings. I generally like to watch the Pokemon World Tournament finale every year for all the different cups, because I find it really interesting how people build those teams and strategize. I was really into competitive Pokemon for a while, but I ended up dropping away from it because I got really fucking sick of IVs and EVs. Conceptually, it's probably the worst aspect of Pokemon to me. Like, I love Pokemon as a whole. The strategic end of competitive play for double battles is really fun, but I feel like IVs and EVs really hold back the number of player options. Like, you have to do a bunch of breeding bullshit to get your moves and the ideal stats, and you have to worry about natures. And unless you want to have somebody else do it for you that's more into that, you have to deal with a bunch of tedious bullshit for hours upon hours, where you have to constantly check stats and whatnot, hoping for the end result to be something that you actually want. And who knows if you'll actually get it in a reasonable amount of time, which is why most people resort to hacking. So I think it would be really nice if they streamlined that. Sun and Moon kinda tried this by implementing items that you could use to train up your IVs on any individual Pokemon to max. But the items were so arduous to get, and they were only effective on level 100 Pokemon, so it was borderline useless. And Sun and Moon was also a huge step back for competitive play in regards to EVs as well, since while there were Hordes battles, which made it easier to fight particular enemies... No, it wasn't Horde battles, it was SOS. No, so it is a whole step down. While you could SOS battle infinitely for the same Pokemon that you want to beat to get a certain EV up, they removed the easier, if not more tedious, Super Training from X and Y and Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, which I thought was a really good solution to EV training, even though it took longer. It was more straightforward, mechanically, so it was easier for me to get into personally, even though technically I think Sun and Moon is supposedly easier for EVs, but overall I think this could be simplified in another way. The whole point behind IVs, according to the developers, is to make each Pokemon feel unique, and I feel like that could be accomplished in other ways. I feel like natures are a good way of doing that already. Unique moves through breeding is another. And one change that I think would be really good for that is, if any of you are familiar, Spinda actually has unique patterns for each individual Spinda you come across. I don't remember the exact number, but statistically you're unlikely to come across the same pattern for Spinda twice. So if they implemented similar textures and patterns to every other Pokemon to give them a bit more of a personal and unique flair, I think that could solve a lot of those issues. They kind of brought that concept in with the Alolan forms, but it was still restricted to that region, so as long as you were in Alola, you could only get the Alolan forms unless you traded in the original forms from the previous games. And I think the solution is somewhere in there. I'm really hoping Gen 8 solves this issue. Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, while not Gen 8, does seem to be taking steps to resolve the Eevee issues with items that are, I think it's like candy or something that boosts individual stats. Sort of in the same way vitamins and whatnot do in the original games, although less restricted, I imagine. You know, you probably grind Pokemon into candy like in Pokemon Go and then feed them to the other members of the same species to get them into cannibalism. That's how that works. Not really. But yeah, hopefully that will solve part of the issue. And on a related note, I'm really hoping that Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee will bring back the competitive scene based entirely around the original 150 Pokemon. Not because I'm a Gen 1, or God no, but because I think it would be really freaking amusing to watch the competitive play just surround a single gen. Because Gen 5 did that as well, like back when Black and White was just a thing. Not Black and White 2, because that actually opened up the availability of Pokemon to a lot more options. I think the original Black and White only allowed for competitive play using the Pokemon from Unova, so it would be really interesting to see that happen. Now right here with the color scheme, I wanted to have some heavy contrast. If I went for a greenish teal color like I was originally thinking of doing for the body, I was worried that wouldn't contrast well with plants on the main body, save for the petals on the head. So I went for a hot pink and light pink color scheme on the head and body to draw attention away, to contrast the leaves and the claws and the seed tail. And I debated a long time on how I wanted the color. I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention, but I was considering on multiple occasions during this drawing session as to whether or not I wanted it to be that particular color. I considered a harsher orange color, amongst other things. I wanted to deepen the outline here as well, because I felt like the outline was a bit too thin. I wasn't overly happy with my final shading on this, as you'll see. but it does highlight the design enough. Overall, I think this design was about as good as I was going to get, but it's still not really quite up to my standard. Where was I on the competitive play? Oh, right. Gen 1 competitive play. Like I said, it would be really interesting to do a single generation of Pokemon with only the ones from that gen that were originally introduced there being used for competitive play. Because it would force people to use unique strategies, although Gen 1 balancing being as broken as it is. Even though the special stats have been fixed, I expect if such a tournament happens, it's going to be heavily skewed, no doubt about it. Gen 5 is a lot better in that regard. I personally think Gen 5 is better than Gen 1 in general, aside from the world design structure. As you guys will know from my Pokemon map rant, where I said that Unova is objectively the worst map outside of Kalos, until Black and White 2, which actually resolved the issue quite a bit. So, yeah, I think in terms of just gameplay balance, in terms of the Pokemon available, Black and White definitely has a more interesting roster available for competitive play. Yeah, for competitive play, I kind of lost my train of thought there. I think Sun and Moon is probably the best they've been at having a good balance of Pokemon useful for competitive play, because normally it's just skewed for legendaries. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire was fucking atrocious for balance. Like, every competitive team, just about every single one, had Primal Groudon, Primal Kyogre, what was it? Is it Mega Rayquaza? I want to say it's Mega Rayquaza, it's not Primal version for that. Yeah, Mega Rayquaza, because for some stupid reason the developers thought it was a good idea to make it so Primal Reversion didn't count as Mega Evolution, so you could have 2 Primals and Mega Rayquaza as your party, and it was broken as shit. So at least 3 slots of any given team were those 3 Pokemon. There was a bit more leeway with the other party slots, but that was generally what you'd see, and since you can only use 4 Pokemon at a time during a competitive match, it was extremely limiting, and it was very frustrating for me to watch. So that was actually the one year I didn't pay attention to competitive play. That was enough to really turn me off from that. Gen 7 has a bit of that, with the Tapus being really good. I haven't watched the Ultra Sun Moon World Tournament. I don't know. Has it happened yet? I don't think that's happened yet. But I'm hoping that will do a bit better because they did balance it out a bit more. Assuming Ultra Necrozma isn't allowed, which it probably isn't. I think it should be more interesting because they did implement some new Ultra Beasts, like a Fairy Check, which is meant to handle Tapus in form of the new Ultra Beast. I forget what its name is, but it's Poison Dragon type. Poison to counteract the Fairy typing of the Tapus and hit their weakness, so it could safely be used against them while raising its own special stat. So it would have made for more interesting battles. I never actually got to test it myself because I was working on a competitive team built around that to an extent. But like I said, I don't really like how they handle IVs and EVs, so I just kind of gave up. Sun and Moon actually is the only Pokemon generation where I never actually bothered to do all of the post-game stuff. Never fought Red and Blue, even though I was really excited to, because I wanted to build a perfect team, and because I can't get IVs and EVs to how I want, and my indecisiveness with my team building, I just ended up giving up. Unfortunately, that's how it is. Okay, back to the drawing. I stopped paying attention again. I gave it red eyes because, I thought that looked cool. Still working on the contrast. I'm really happy with how the leaves turned out in particular. The overall design is just merely okay. Petals turned out good. Leaves turned out good. Claws and seed turned out good. But the main body, I think, could have used probably a bit more detail. I think I went a bit too plain, because both Ivysaur and Tyrantrum have additional details to their main body beyond just the fluff. And I didn't really capitalize on that, which is a bit of a disappointment, but, I'll resolve that or not during the 3rd Trifusion where I combine all the fusions. So, yeah. The petal color scheme, petals are a bit tricky, especially when they're pink, because you gotta get like really, really bright pinks for the highlights, but also keep the dark bits toned down so that the overall petal looks bright in contrast to the body, because you don't want it so dark that it starts to blend in with the body that you're trying to draw around, which in this case it wouldn't really be much of an issue since it's a dark enough shade. Overall, I think this drawing turned out okay. I'm honestly getting kind of tired of talking at this point. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you enjoyed my rambling. Hope y'all have a fantastic night and enjoy the rest of the video, because this is more time than I put into the last one for talking. You can't fault me. I hope you enjoyed my competitive Pokemon ramblings and whatnot. God, do I hope they fix that Virginia. There's one thing I want, it's to be able to get into competitive play without the bullshit. Oh well. See y'all next time. It'll probably be another art video. I'm still working on .hack. I haven't said that on Twitter, but I'm working on .hack video because I really wanted to cover .hack GU for a while, because I played .hack Volume 3 back in high school. I think it's like, what, 2009, 2009, I think. I played Volume 3. Haven't really touched the series since, so I've been really looking forward to get back to that. I really hope that they do a HD collection for .hack Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine, because I really enjoyed the story of those, even though the gameplay was complete garbage. But yeah, I'll be talking about .hack. It does some really interesting stuff with the narrative and setting, and I'd really like to talk about that, even though it's not really my forte. But nobody else seems to give a shit about .hack, so I might as well be the one person who does. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that, and I'll catch y'all next time. Hope this video lit a fire under you.